So plastic electrical boxes versus metal electrical boxes. I just did a poll and you guys jumped in and over 2,000 you gave your feedback. And the question we asked is, which do you prefer? Do you prefer using plastic or metal? And 68% of the audience said they prefer using plastic. But when it comes to DIY electrical, you're most likely going to run across both types depending on the age of your home and where you're at in the United States or Canada. So let's use these simple outlet installations. The plastic one is actually wired correctly, and we do have an issue with the metal electrical box, which should help to highlight some of the things you need to consider to safely work on both plastic and metal boxes without any issues around your house. So from the poll, it seemed like most people were comfortable with plastic. I think they're comfortable because they're not worried about the hot conductor shorting out versus plastic because it's not going to conduct any electricity, so they're more comfortable with that. This is a standard new work box. You might be used to seeing the more common blue. This one was the most common by far for years and years and years, but there was some shortage in the supply chain, so you see more gray new work boxes available at your big box stores. And then that's going to be in contrast to something like this old work box, which is going to have the levers. You're going to cut out a hole, insert in your old work box, and then you'll go ahead and tighten these levers in the back, and then that's going to pinch the drywall, and that will hold that box into place. That's when you're modifying something after your wall covering's on, your drywall is on. You'd use old work compared to new work where you're installing those when you just have your framing up. One difference between this new work box, you can see there's basically no wire retention back there. It's just a little tab that you broke open. You ran the Romex through there. Should be noted, you're looking for 6 inches of wire, 2 conductors in your ground from the end of that sheathing, and at least 3 inches of that should be past the edge of the box. Now, if you look at your old work box, there is actually a lot better clamp or retention mechanism where you couldn't pull that Romex back out. So that is a much better design for this old work box. Now that does meet code, and although a negative for holding the Romex in, it makes it pretty darn easy to modify this box. Maybe you need to bring another line of Romex up and through. So we could easily do that if we were modifying it later on. We were inside the wall cavity. We put a fishing line down through there, and then we wanted to pull new Romex up and through. Makes it very easy to do that because there's really no retention of that Romex. And just know, if you are working with new work boxes, they will have tabs here on the side. Those tabs should be set against your stud. That's going to give you standard spacing for 1/2 inch wall covering so that your box is slightly under that surface once everything's installed. If you have thicker, you actually do have measurement lines here that you could reference. You would set this box to that depth, drive your 2 mounting nails, and then you know all your boxes are set to the correct depth once your wall surface comes on. Remember, standard 1/2 inch is pretty straightforward, but if you're doing like a backsplash or something, remember to set it correct depth because you're going to have a lot more thickness of wall surface by the time you get your tile up. And then mounting the outlet or even a light switch is super straightforward. I know some of you like to wrap with electrical tape for your outlets or light switches, and some even like wire nuts and Wago lever nuts to be wrapped in electrical tape. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't do that on my own projects, and especially when it comes to plastic electric boxes. I just fold the wires back, I get it lined up, make sure that the wires are not pushing the outlet left or right, so when I start to tighten it up, tighten those mounting screws up, I have an angled outlet that doesn't give a nice fit and finish look, so make sure it's going straight in. And then hopefully your drywall is cut correctly to the box and your Mickey Mouse ears then settle right on the surface of that drywall and get your depth correct. So I can see why a lot of DIYers really do prefer the plastic electrical boxes, but let's jump over to metal. What is actually wrong with the installation right behind me? And you will see a link right below the video in the description. Any of the tools I'm using throughout this video or any of my other videos, you'll see over on our Amazon, like the Milwaukee ECX #1 screwdriver that I use to tighten in that outlet, which comes in super handy for electrical work like this, or my favorite Wago 221 lever nuts, which are perfect for DIYers and any electrical work that you have around the house. So what is wrong with this installation over here? And this is not according to code. I know it looks very similar with the hot neutral ground, just like we had in our plastic. And just to be clear, this is a commercial grade Legrand. It's my favorite commercial grade outlet, and just in general, this is what I use on a lot of projects. This is going straight in. This is different. If I had a cheap residential grade with the holes going straight in. That is called speed wiring, or a lot of people call it backstabbing. 14 gauge is the only that is compatible with that. That is not what's going on here. This is called back wiring, a feature a lot of the different commercial grade or spec grade outlets has. So I just have it straight in wired like that. The issue is we do not have our box bonded or grounded. So right now this box does not have a ground. So if the black hot conductor were to come in contact with the metal surface, it were to cut through the insulation, then that hot conductor would energize this metal box. This metal box would be looking for a ground. So if someone came along and touched it and provided that path to the ground, that's when you get bit. That's when we start to get in trouble. So you do need to have your metal boxes always grounded. So I'll take off what is called the mud ring. And this is a little confusing, but it's common to have a 4x4 box, which could be a 2-gang box. It could have 2 outlets in it. But in a lot of older homes, you would see a 4x4 box with a single gang mud ring. So it's just going to accommodate one outlet or one switch. And then it's a mud ring because it has that offset. Our metal boxes are going to be set just below the stud surface itself. So unlike the plastic, which protrudes past the stud surface, that is why we need to get the corresponding mud ring. This is a 1/2 inch. They come in other sizes. 1/4 inch or 1 inch are commonly available at most big box stores. So that's going to get your depth and your mounting correct for your wall surface. But back to bonding. What I always carry with me is I just have these pre-made pigtails with a grounding screw. Maybe you just get the grounding screw and you go ahead and cut off a piece of Romex, pull out the bare ground. Either one of those works, but most of your boxes are going to have a threaded hole, which is going to accommodate that grounding screw. So all you need to do is go ahead and tighten in your ground wire, your pigtail. So now we can bond our metal box and we can be code compliant and have a safe installation. So the thing is, okay, now what do we do? Do we tie this all on the ground screw of the outlet? Not so fast. Let's go ahead and make up a pigtail to get this all tied together. So we'd go ahead and remove our J-hook from the commercial grade Legrand. You could straighten the J-hook off if you wanted to. I'm just going to cut it with my micro side cutters. And then with the hybrids, I would straighten that out a bit. And with the 3-wire Waga, this is a 221, so the 221 lever nut, and specifically a 413, which means it goes up to 12 gauge and it accommodates 3 wires. So I just make my pigtail. I already put my J-hook in it. I go ahead and put my second ground in, and then go ahead and put my first ground. Now those pigtails just come with the green insulation. You can have a bare ground going to your box. That is perfectly fine. And then I'll go ahead and put my J-hook in the clockwise direction around my ground screw on the outlet and tighten things up. Okay, so now we have all of our grounds tied together. Technically, a lot of these commercial grades do have self-grounding tabs. So if I tied this pigtail together with the Romex ground, then when I mounted this outlet, this grounding strap, we'll zoom in on that. See those little pieces of wire there? So that would actually ground through your mounting screw into the yoke of the outlet, which goes to the ground. So technically you actually don't need this wire because that strap would ground, but that's only on commercial grade. So it's best practice for a lot of us DIYers just to go ahead and do it up like this. We'll put our mud ring back on. The thing about metal boxes, there are quite a few different mud rings or plates you can get for a lot of different applications. That can be a little overwhelming for DIYers because they might not have all that experience. You can do different searches and see what your options are. So even in this case, mounting this, I would not wrap with electrical tape. Even though it's metal, I have my hot screws here. The housing is flush with those screws. I have seen a lot where you might have a residential, you do a J-hook in the clockwise direction on your hot side, but then people leave the other non-used screw, the hot terminal, out further than the housing, then you might be more prone for this screw terminal hot to touch a mud ring, and then that's going to trip your breaker, assuming you have your ground connected up. If you do not have a ground, that is going to energize your metal box and cause issues. Just know there are a lot of different options when it comes to metal boxes. You have small handy boxes, which are much smaller. The box fill, or how many wires and wire nuts we could have in here, is much less. And this is actually the only example, GFCI, if I'm mounting that to a handy box, where I will wrap that with electrical tape just because it's so tight in there. You're going to have wires all over the place. That is the one example in the past, not every time, but in the past I have wrapped with electrical tape. Let me know what you guys think down in the description. What do you prefer, and when do you actually use the electrical tape, and why? Now, one other thing I'll call out, because this is a classic failure in terms of DIYers with metal boxes, is if you need to retrofit another piece of Romex, maybe you're doing something and expanding out another outlet, maybe you're adding a switch, whatever you're doing where another piece of Romex needs to pass into the box, it is not as easy as just popping out one of these knockouts and then running the Romex down and through. You do need to make sure that you're clamping your Romex when it's coming through. So you got to get the correctly sized clamp so that you can pass the Romex through. Now, usually what that means is you need to pre-install that onto your Romex, take the nut off, and then fish that up through the wall with enough Romex remaining, and then these threads are going to pop either down if you're coming from the top, or up and through. The threads will come inside the box, the wire will be coming through the box, then you can put that nut down and through, and then you can go ahead and tighten that nut down, and then you'll have it securely fastened to your Romex because you pre-installed that and securely fastened to your box. If you do not do that, that is one of the leading causes of cutting that insulation and causing a short. So if you're not grounded and you're doing that, you're setting yourself up for failure. So let me know what you think. Personally, for me, I use plastic. For all my retrofitting, I use plastic old work boxes, especially like single gang, sometimes 2 gang boxes. And then if I have some new framing, I also just use the plastic boxes. Where I use metal is I love 4x4 boxes and basements for junction boxes. I like the robustness of those. I like actually securing my Romex in. So that's where I use metal boxes for my own project. Let me know what you guys are doing on your projects. Are you a DIYer and you don't want to touch metal with a 10-foot pole? Give me some feedback. I always like hearing from you guys so I can adjust future videos to make sure I'm meeting your needs and helping you along with your project. Now, one of the only projects where I did use electrical tape to wrap a GFCI was right here in this video. So this is when you have old 2-prong ungrounded outlets and you want the ability to have a 3-prong outlet. You can do this code compliant by using a GFCI. Check out this video right here. I'll walk you through the complete process just in case you're looking to swap out some old 2-prong outlets. So thanks for joining me on this video, and we'll catch you on that next one. Take care.